Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the September 12th, 2022 council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. I'd like to welcome everyone back from our summer recess and hope everyone had an enjoyable summer. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestrea.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. If anyone wants to speak during our public portion, if you have a paper, just bring them up now, and then I can address you when we get to that portion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next is the approval of the minutes from our Committee of the Whole meeting, July 25th, 2022. I hope everyone has had time to read these minutes over. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea,
Second.
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any changes or amendments or deletions to those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? These minutes have been approved as written. Next, we will move to the approval of the minutes from the special council meeting on July 25th. That was the committee of the whole meeting, I'm sorry. I hope everyone has had time to read those minutes over. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Teresi, second by Mr. Monaco. Are there any changes or suggested deletions to those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? These minutes have been approved. Does any council member have any special announcements or correspondence? Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. Received an email from a resident on Commonwealth Avenue complaining about the deer population and asking if we're doing anything about it. So she's very upset because it's eating up her flowers, droppings, rubbing antlers on her tree lawn, which was planted after the construction. So just ask me what we're doing about it. So thank you.
Here, do you have anything on? No? Okay. I guess we can look into that, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. Chagrin River Watershed Partnership will have a meeting via Zoom on September 15th at 4 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Any other further comments from council? Okay. Next are reports of officers, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening. Welcome to everyone who is here in attendance and to anybody watching. We're back from our extended summer break, but it's good to be back. Mainland Commons project is quickly developing. As everyone has seen, Sheets opened its doors last month, and we're getting very good comments from our residents about the amenities and the cleanliness over there. So that's a welcome addition. Our community garage sale was a remarkable success this year. We had over 60 homes taking part in the event, which was this last weekend. The Parks and Recreation Department organized the event and prepared a map including items for sale at each home, and it was quite an event. Turned out really good. It's good to see schools back in session. And this is our yearly reminder to drivers to slow down, watch out for kids. Let's obey the school bus laws. And I'd like to thank the police and fire department for their excellent work responding to the plane crash last month at the middle school. Miraculously, the pilots were not seriously injured and the students remained safe. Thank God that's something we don't see all the time in our city, but it was pretty remarkable work by our police and fire. And then lastly, Community Partnership on Aging is collaborating with Piata, one of our newest restaurants in the city, and there is a fundraising event to help raise money for CPA. And if you visit in-store at Piata on September 16th and mention this flyer, which we will be posting on our social media, 20% of the proceeds from the order will be donated back to Community Partnership on Aging. So we'll make sure we get that up so everybody has an opportunity to participate in that fundraiser. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? Law Director, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no formal report, but I would request an executive session be held after the regular meeting, at the end of the regular meeting, I should say tonight, not after it,
Thank you.
to discuss economic development.
All right, Assistant Director of Finance, Mrs. Scully.
Thank you. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. We will now move to the agenda of the reports of committees, commissions, and boards. Beginning with the Building Committee, Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A building committee meeting was held on August 17 of this year at 5:30 p.m. Present were myself, Vice Chair Don Meno, Council President Diane Schneider via audio, Law Director Paul Murphy, Director of Building Braden Thomas, Building Inspector Chris Corrigan, Chief of Police Anthony Melly, Police Captain Donovan Paquette, and Deputy Clerk of Council Shanisha Lloyd. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss permit fees, rental license fees, point of sale fees, vacant property registration, donation box location, and Airbnb establishment. This was the first of, I think, quite a few meetings that we're going to be holding, regarding those issues. Regarding the permit fees, Mr. Thomas did a comparison with 17 cities for residential and commercial permits. We were really surprised at the amount of work that he put into this project. He was very thorough. He had a terrific presentation. And at the end, we were all in agreement that the study showed that the Mayfield Heights fees are consistently lower than other communities. So we will have follow-up meetings and propose a new fee schedule to council. Regarding the rental license, the current fees is $20 per unit per multifamily structure and $50 for single-family dwelling. Mr. Thomas suggested a $5 increase to bring it to $25 per unit for multi-units, and Mr. Mano suggested a $200 fee for single rental units. More discussion will take place on this issue. We'll also discuss the point of sale fees, which currently is at $25. Regarding the vacant property registration, Mr. Thomas stated that the city currently doesn't have a method of identifying vacant residential and commercial properties. He's proposing a vacant property registration with a fee of $200 per residential and $400 per commercial establishment. Regarding donation boxes, Mr. Thomas also stated that there are several donation boxes throughout the city. He would like to see a legislation that would give his department the ability to register, address, and regulate them. Mr. Murphy offered to draft an ordinance regarding this issue. Then regarding the Airbnb, the city currently has a moratorium. A state legislation could be enacted soon to allow them. In order to be proactive, the law director will draft an ordinance to restrict and regulate their use. And this is the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Monaco. Are there any questions, Mr. Mano?
I just have one correction on those rental fees. My point was people who own property in the city but do not live in the city, and people who don't live in the state of Ohio that own property here, and people who live in other countries that own property here. Those are the fees that I want to see addressed, because in most cases, it's almost impossible to get in touch with any of these people when there's problems, and then the city ends up bearing the brunt of getting that straightened out. So that's a little bit more than just looking to raise rental fees here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Are there any other further questions? Okay. Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report.
Thank you. Legislative Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Legislative Committee did meet on June 27th, and council has the meeting minutes concerning tabled ordinance 2022-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Public Works and Service, Mr. Balestrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Public Works did not meet, but just to inform the public and the council that work is being done in this city, but it's being done very slowly. Speaking to Mr. Gerson, a lot of the contractors are backed up, have lean on supplies, they're lean on supplies, lean on help. So things will be done that were contracted. We don't think the sidewalk program will be done this year. No one has picked up that contract. So we'll probably have a meeting to discuss maybe doubling up on our sidewalk program next year, but getting those bids out a lot earlier so we can, have a contractor on board early on. That's my report.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Balestrea? Parks and Recreation, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no formal report, but I would just like to follow up on what the mayor said about the citywide garage sale. I participated in that, and I know several other people who did, and it really was a tremendous success. And Park and Rec worked very hard on putting that together. And I'd like to see that really grow over the next few years. It's just a great idea. And
It is.
the comments from people coming in were, it's tremendous. They loved it. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mano? Safety and Transportation, Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Safety and Transportation Committee met on August 10th, and the purpose of the meeting was to discuss a new rescue squad and a new command vehicle. Mr. Monaco, myself, Ms. Scully, and Shanisha Lloyd were present at the meeting along with Chief Elliott. Currently, we have 2 of our 3 squads in service. Our first squad is a 2020, the second squad is a 2015, and the third squad is a 2005 unit, and it is currently acting as a backup unit. We are averaging over 5,000 calls per year now and going out on calls 12 to 15 times per day. Approximately 40% of the calls use the second squad due to the first unit, which may be delayed at the hospitals. So we're using a great deal of mutual aid as well when we have multiple calls. Years back, Mrs. Fagan created a capital improvement fund, and approximately 50% of the funds that come in from EMS billing go into this fund, which is then used for replacement vehicles. The chief anticipates the cost of a new squad to be between $250,000 and $275,000, and has heard from the vendors that they may have a minimum of 12 to 18 months to receive this new vehicle. The chief illustrated in his PowerPoint the timeline for purchasing of replacement vehicles, which he spreads out over time, allowing the department to prepare ahead for these large purchases. Beside the new squad, the chief is requesting a new Chevy Tahoe command car, as it is slightly larger than the Explorer that we are currently using. This vehicle will be equipped with vests, oxygen, rescue task force equipment, additional radios, et cetera. And this vehicle goes out on calls to assist with the events. Excuse me. This vehicle would be purchased on state terms and would cost approximately $45,000 to equip the new command vehicle, with additional equipment at the cost of approximately $12,000. The purchase of this command car was a budgeted request in last year's budget and has been planned for. Again, there are supply chain issues on delivery, which would take the delivery into 2023 and possibly 2024. As always, the chief did a great job with information and a PowerPoint presentation. On tonight's agenda are the two requests which are presented to council for the vote. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Tressi. Are there any questions?
Excuse me.
Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Board of Zoning Appeals will meet tomorrow here in council chambers at 7 p.m. There are several items on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And Planning Commission, Mr. Balestra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report. The Planning Commission was on recess and did not meet.
Thank you. All right, we will now proceed to the public portion of the meeting. Pursuant to City Code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes allotted for the entire public portion. If you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. However, please note that this is not an opportunity for debate or slighted comments. If you would like to be heard this evening and have not done so, please fill out a form located at the table at the public entrance of the council chamber. During the public portion, I will call each person wishing to speak to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record and clearly speak into the microphone. It is now 7:20, and I will open up the public portion. I have Anthony DiVincenzo, sorry.
There's an ordinance in the building code regarding maintenance of fencing. I have a fence I put up 6 years ago.
Mr. DiVincenzo, can you state your name and address?
My name's Anthony DiVincenzo, 1266 Elmwood Road.
Thank you.
I put a fence up 6 years ago. I'm trying to restain it. I've not been allowed to do so by the neighbor in the back. I've tried to work with the building department separately, as well as the police department separately. I've not gotten help through either of those avenues. So I'm here talking about it, which I don't believe should be necessary, but here I am. I need suggestions or recommendations on how I'm to follow this zoning code that I could read you word for word if you'd like, but I'm sure you're all aware of it. How do I follow this? If I'm not allowed to take my fence down, I have to get on the other side. The neighbor won't allow it. The building department won't help me, and the police won't help me. Got a copy of a survey, and I have space to get on the other side. I don't want problems. I just want to take care of my fence. Can anybody offer some suggestions, please?
So today I spoke with you earlier.
Correct.
And then I did call the building director.
I spoke
And
with
I
him briefly.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if Mr. Thomas had reached you or not.
Briefly, we're going to speak again tonight, hopefully.
Okay.
But
So hopefully.
I need it to be known that these separate avenues, the police department and the building department, I've been in contact with Lenny Morgano and other individuals who, for 2 years, have not been taking care of this, and I've been voicing it again and again and again, and I'm trying to do it the right way.
Okay.
Someone's got to help. Thank
Right,
you.
we brought it to our attention, and we appreciate that, so hopefully we can get you some help. Thank you. Mayor.
I did receive your voicemail today, so we can get together, definitely, and go over our options, what has been done and what can be done.
Thank you. Deborah Kramer.
My name is Deborah Kramer. I live at 1110 Belrose Road, and you probably know why I'm here. We spoke last May about solar panels and the city restricting residents from having functioning solar systems on the roof. And my understanding is that when the legislative committee met, it was not on the agenda, so I'm just here to keep this on your attention, basically, because it's been way too long. And we really need to be allowed to put solar panels on our roofs.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And Mr. Wayne Natale?
Good evening. My name's Wayne Natale. I reside at 6440 Woodhawk Drive, and I am here tonight on behalf of several of our streets residents, just looking for some answers in terms of where we are on the Woodhawk resurfacing project. There's a lot of rumors flying around, so hopefully we can get some answers in terms of where things are. What is the projected start date? What is the finish date? How are the seams that are buckling up and down that road, probably well over 100 of them, going to be addressed? What plans are being developed to contain traffic? It is going to be an absolute nightmare. Perhaps that's why this project has been bumped and bumped and bumped. There are over 700 residents within that condo project. I'm guessing over 1,000 cars a day traversing that street. I've never seen a traffic count done, although I have requested one as long ago as 2 years ago, so you guys would have a good feel for what we're going to be up against. It's going to be very, very ugly, no matter what's done on that street. So we're looking for a detailed plan on what it's going to be done and how it's going to be done, and I believe that plan should be communicated to residents so they can know what to expect, because it's not going to be pretty. A follow-up question that I had relative to the street. I've seen several communities that have my speed signs. They tell you how fast you're going. How expensive are those signs? Could we not get one of those put up in the middle of that street? You know, despite, our police department's efforts to patrol that street, cars fly up and down that street. A little visual warning can't be that expensive to at least tell people how fast they're going. And I would also be curious as to what the tolerance is. I've heard it's 10 miles over the speed limit in general throughout Ohio. Well, on a residential street, if it's 35 and a 25, that's way too fast. And we see a lot of traffic moving well over 35. Lastly, if you could somehow, either in a communication, explain to the public what the forum is to reopen the public comment section for questions once we hear something in the way of a resolution, because once comments are closed, how do we then ask follow-up questions that are stimulated, from that? Comments are closed, and then, we have more questions. So I would just be curious as to what the procedural mechanism is for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Oh, come up forward. Thank you.
Got a point. No, I'd like to ask.
It's okay. Thank you. You could just go to the podium. Mr. Puno.
Hi, my name is Sandro Puno, and I reside at 6394 Longridge Road. Within the past year, everything's going really good in the city of Mayfield Heights with new stores and new restaurants and all that. A couple of restaurants that I'd like to see here, based on location, would be like Carrabba's or Macaroni Grill, because they're like on the west side. And also too, for the Walmart building, if there's any way that maybe a bowling alley could go there, or maybe a putt-putt course. I'm just kind of like thinking stuff for kids to do. Like when I was younger, I hung out at Eastgate Coliseum a lot, and Mayland had a bowling alley too. It just seems like there's not, besides Sheets, and Raising Cane's, I don't know what kids are doing besides being on their phones and video games, but to get them out, to do stuff, because I bowl at Wycliffe Lanes, and usually like after 9 o'clock, they have open bowling, and it gets, pretty crowded there, so either that or like I said, like a putt-putt course, like it used to be, like where the giant slide was. Okay, thanks.
Be nice. Thank you. God bless you. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? I appreciate everyone's comments for coming up here, and we'll try, I jotted some of these things down, and hopefully I can get some answers to everyone, okay? Thank you. It is now 7:27. I will close the public portion. We'll move to resolution number 2022-56. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2022-56, a resolution authorizing the mayor to extend for 1 year an agreement with Medical Mutual Life Insurance Company to provide for administrative services in connection with processing leave requests from city employees covered by the Family Medical Leave Act. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Tressi,
Second.
second by Mr. Belstrea. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Moved by Mr. Monaco,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Everyone should have received an email and an updated report from our HR director, Mrs. Augustine. We adopted this program in December of 2021, and the program will end December of 2022. This resolution would allow for these services to continue for an additional year at the cost of $2.65 per eligible employee per month. The reason for the request for an additional year is to provide more time for Munis, which is our new city's software package, to go live, and in which it doesn't until January 9th of 2023. It will give IT and our HR and payroll department extra time to learn the software and make sure it is in compliance with the FMLA regulations and the U.S. Department of Labor. Mrs. Augustine is here this evening. If anyone has any further questions or would like to ask her about the program.
Just one.
Mr. Balestrea.
Thank you. Just one question, Ms. Augustine, if you could answer. The projected go-live date for the HR is January of next year, and this proposal is for a year extension. My understanding is we can, not accept the contract or, discontinue it at any time. Do you think we would need a whole year after the go-live from September to September to stay with this? Or is it something that your department, along with finance, can come up with sometime before that?
I think it would be helpful if payroll and HR would have the year, because we're going to be learning the ESS program, which is going to be the employee portal, and we're learning the finance portion and the payroll portion, plus this special component of FMLA. So I think it would be helpful for us, because we're learning a lot all at once, just for that year, just to make sure we're doing it right.
Like a 6-month training program then, approximately. Okay.
And what would the total cost be?
It's around $4,300 for the year. They didn't increase the price from when we first engaged their services.
I know you reviewed it with us back in July to tell us how you used it.
Right.
And you seemed to be helpful.
It's very helpful. And we've had a bigger focus on FMLA, trying to really push the education. So employees are really contacting, Medical Mutual when they're supposed to be for, reporting their FMLA absences. We've had 36. We just had another one last week. So employees, they go out on paternity leave. We have illness, injury, employee injury, taking care of parents, taking care of children. workers' comp cases, that's all FMLA related, so we've been really trying to educate employees on that, and it's increasing the volume.
I have just one more question. Do the employees have to use all of their sick time before they eligible for the FMLA?
FMLA runs concurrently with the sick time, so it's at the same time. Unless they don't have sick time built up, then
That
it
makes
would just be FMLA, which is unpaid.
Right, okay. Mr. Balestria?
Just to follow up to what you said, Renee, are any of those cases, any follow-up to COVID-related, long-term symptomologies? I know there's stuff coming out now that there's people who've had it can have repeat symptoms, and I was just wondering if, without disclosing anything personal, if any of those cases are some of ours.
I don't know all of them because Medical Mutual is handling the physician certification portion, so I don't see a lot of what's going on other than it's an employee illness or an employee injury.
Okay.
So I couldn't say.
Mrs. Tressi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mrs. Augustine, is there a certain length for FMLA? Can you be out for 1 year or 2 years, or is there a certain period of time?
FMLA is 12 weeks in it's in a 1 year period, and we have a rolling look-back period of 12 months. But it depends because we're fortunate to have sick time. FMLA is really for people who don't have sick time. It gives them their job security while they're out, but it's unpaid. We're fortunate to have some sick time, so we run it concurrently, but it could be 12 weeks.
Are there any other further questions? Thank you, Mrs. Augustine.
Thank you.
All right, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, this resolution has been approved. Moving to resolution number 2022-57, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-57, a resolution authorizing an increase in the city's local share to resurface Som Center Road, ratifying verbal approval by council of said increase, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Manos, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mr. Monaco. If you recall, over the summer, we received an email explaining that we needed to increase the city's local share for the Som Center project so that we could provide curb and apron repairs at the time of the resurfacing project. This was a voice vote that was placed on July 25th, and the actual resolution has to be on tonight's agenda. Are there any comments or questions from council? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, this resolution has been approved. Moving to resolution number 2022-58, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-58, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Ganley Chevrolet of Aurora LLC for the purchase of a Chevy Tahoe command vehicle for use by the Mayfield Heights Fire Department and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Tressi,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Manos, second by Mr. DeJohn. A recap of Mrs. Tressi's report. All members should have received the email from Chief Elliott. He is recommending to council that the fire department needs a new command or truck. The total cost of this vehicle will be $57,000. This would include the equipment needed to have the light bar, siren, and striping put on the vehicle. This will replace the 2014 Ford Explorer, which will be sold outright. And note that this was budgeted for 2022. Do you have a question? Are there any questions from council? All right. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. This motion has been carried. We're going to move to resolution number 22-59, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-59, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Fund Superior Sales Company, Inc., for the purchase of a Lifeline Rescue Squad for use by the Mayfield Heights Fire Department and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Monaco.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Teresi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano and seconded by Mrs. Teresi. Chief Elliott stated in his memo that the wait time for ordering new ambulances is 12 to 18 months. So by authorizing this purchase, it would put us in line for the new vehicle. He is comfortable with Lifeline Company, as this is where other vehicles are from. The total cost for this is I don't have the exact amount. Do you have that? $275,000. The funds would come from our fire department's capital improvement fund, and this fund was set up several years ago for these types of purchases. Funds are supplied to the fund through the EMS billing revenue. Does any council member have any questions?
That's the chief's memo.
Yeah, the total cost is $268,592, not to exceed $275,000. Okay. All right, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Resolution 2022-59 has been approved. Resolution 2022-60, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-60, authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Interaction Insight Corporation to provide Eventide voice recording equipment for the police department and ratifying verbal approval of said purchases by council and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second?
second by Mrs. Teresi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, second by Mr. Balestria. On August 17th, 2022, this council verbally authorized an emergency to provide required equipment of our police and fire dispatch department. The council was polled by an email to replace equipment in an emergency and to purchase it immediately. The total cost for this equipment was in the amount of $28,969. Does any member of council have any questions? Okay. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. This motion has also been adopted. This evening, we have no ordinances, and we also have no motions. So we will now enter an executive session for the purpose of economic development. I need a motion to move.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to move into executive session.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. It is now 7:40. We will recess. Okay. It is now 8:50, and we are back in session. Is there any new business or comments from council? I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mrs. Tressi, second by Mrs. Sabetta. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. We are now adjourned.
Good night.